Boom. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Stupid versus the Spread. I am Alex. You can follow me at Audemon Alex on Twitter. That is Mike. Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mike DiLiello. You'll find me at Mike DiLiello on Twitter. Super excited. I finished up my previews this morning for college football, and God, the juices are flowing. The butterflies are tingling. The feeling is in the air. We are almost there. We're almost back to college football, and I'm super excited at this season. I think it's going to be really interesting, and yeah, just looking forward to it.
Football is back. I mean, as of us recording this episode, yesterday was the Hall of Fame game.
Yep.
And if you are not active on Twitter, you should be, because I saw multiple college football, like first day of camp videos where guys were just going fucking nuts, like clapping it up, getting ready, getting hyped for the season. So super excited. So we're going to go and we
Yeah,
are going
I
to
think
break down.
I was gonna say I think Trevor Penning already got suspended by the Saints because he got in three fights in 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
That's
I look
that's a
forward
guy
to
who's ready for football.
I, I look forward to talking that when we do our NFL preview episode, because that's getting in a fight 3 days in a row in camp against your own teammates is like a fucking wild move.
Yeah, wild.
But so we're gonna break down all of the conferences, the Power Five rather. We're gonna go line by line, kind of on our teams, what we think. This is kind of like a preseason preview. So if you're not up to date on everything that's been going on in the off season, if you're confused about who's looking good, who's not looking good, this is probably a good listen for you to kind of get a hold on what's going on in the college football world. So very excited. So we're gonna start with the ACC. We're gonna
Well,
go.
just I was gonna say let's set the expectations here just a little bit. The show is stupid versus the spread, and we are stupid versus the
We
spread.
are,
That's
yes.
that we are
We are the
we are
stupid.
we are dumb people. We're idiots. We're the public.
More or
We have
less, yes.
I don't have a football playing background.
Neither do I.
We
Well,
are
I played in high school.
we are
Okay.
not we are not experts on football, and that's the point of the show. If you are coming here thinking that we are sharps, that we are both coming to you live from Vegas, where we're going to go place our bets today, and we're going to hammer home cash for you, I'm sorry, this is the wrong show. Uh, we are doing this for entertainment, but also because we're normal people who just like to talk about football and also put a little bit of action and stake on it. Yeah. I mean,
A
I'm
little friendly
currently in
weight.
North. Yeah, I'm in North Carolina, so I can't do that from here. But if I drive to Virginia, I can place bets. Otherwise, my picks will just be picks legally.
Isn't the
But
Constitution beautiful?
we are we're dumb. So we're about to give you a preview of all the Power Five conferences because that's what most people care about, and we both don't have enough time to go all the way through the entire group of five, and we are going to give you the public view, the bet with your hearts, not with analytics, perspective of all of these conferences, all of these teams, and what we're feeling going into this year. So just to set the context here, we are dumb, but we're gonna have fun, and we hope you have fun too. If you don't like it, I don't know.
I mean,
Don't
it's
mind.
us versus the spread, and we are the
Yeah,
stupids.
yeah, we are stupid. So I felt that context was important, just so that way
Yeah, I
if
don't think anyone.
anybody,
If you're listening to this thinking we're experts, good lord.
yeah, if you were coming here to hear about a guy's X Vorp, you're in the wrong place.
I don't know what the draft class from their freshman year is doing, but I know what these guys are doing this year. So that's
Hmm.
kind of where we're at. Um, okay, ACC kind of talk. I think the best team in the ACC is Clemson. Now we're going to go by every team. We're going to talk every team. Um, but the ACC kind of has this thing where there's one good team in it for the past couple of years, and it's been Clemson. I don't know that that's going to change. But going down the list, Do you have anything about Boston College? We're going alphabetically for those who don't know.
Uh,
Uh,
Yeah, really just the wave tops of the conference. My only note here is just there's so much turnover in the ACC. You've got returning and rebounding quarterbacks across the board from like guys like Tyler Van Dyke and Armstrong out of Virginia who are going to be in contention to be NFL picks this year. You got Jurkovich coming off an injury. Leary at NC State is still going to be a force to be reckoned with. Keaton Slovis is transferring into Pittsburgh, and DJ Ungalele is going to
yes, you
try
hit that.
to is going to try to turn this around. You've got new coaches everywhere across the board. Mario Cristobal down in Florida, Brett Pry, Virginia Tech, Tony Elliott, Virginia. So it really yes, on paper Clemson's the best team, but I think this conference across the board could go in so many different directions. And there's not, besides Georgia Tech and Duke, there's really not a bunch of trash cans at the bottom of this conference. So, there's going to be a bunch of teams. And this is kind of the theme of, across the board for all these conferences, but there's going to be a bunch of teams in that 6-win window and somewhere between 5 and 8 wins. And in the I think the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 are the three conferences where I go, I don't know who's from 3 to 8. I don't know what those teams are. Obviously, the ACC, that's a bigger window, but it's just a lot of parity in the middle, and we'll see who shakes out. So we could start with Boston College. I mean, the story of Boston College this year is Phil Jurkovich is going to take this team as far as it can go. He,
100%.
Prior to the injury, he was playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They've lost a bit in the transfer portal, but they're going to have a decent defense, and Jurkovich's going to come back, and he's going to carry them as far as they're going to go. I think they're maybe a bowl team. But we'll see. I think they're in this middle band of somewhere 5 to 7 wins, and they'll be decent. They won't be terrible. Christian Mahogany was a huge loss for them, tearing his ACL in the offseason. So it's interesting. There's some pieces there where they'll be sneaky for some teams, but I don't see a lot of top end potential.
Yeah, I mean, I have them at so what's interesting about their schedule is that they're either playing really good teams, Clemson, Florida State, Wake Forest, or they're playing really bad teams like Syracuse. They're over under 6.5. I almost lean on the under there because I just don't think Boston College is going to pull out more than 6 wins. I actually have them at exactly 6 wins and making a bowl game just because I think they're pretty middle of the pack. I don't think there's anything that really shoots out to me that says that they're going to upset any one of those teams that I mentioned. So I just, excited for Boston College, excited for football, but I don't see them as like a top contender in the ACC by any means. And I think that's going to be the case with a lot of middle of the pack teams. It wouldn't shock me if they didn't make a bowl game. It wouldn't shock me if they did make a bowl game. But I think on the over under of 6.5, which I saw as of today, I'm leaning the under. But I don't think Boston College is going to surprise anybody this year.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, their PFF has their projected win total at 5.9, so 6 is pretty much nail on the head. I'd lean under because you're counting on Jurkovich has to stay healthy for them to even sniff bowl contention. And if he doesn't, they're going to be somewhere 4 wins, 5 wins. They're not going to hit that over. So yeah, I think that's right.
Moving on to Clemson, everybody's favorite ACC team. What are your thoughts, Mike?
They are not my favorite ACC team. I sneaking ahead to our card here, but this is maybe my biggest take of these preseason team totals. I love Clemson's under. I do.
Interesting.
Yes, they are. Vegas has them at 10.5, and everybody has penciled them in as the bona fide winner in the ACC this year. But I am not convinced that DJ is the quarterback that's going to get them there. And when you look at it that way, I think they have 2 losable games this year against NC State and Notre Dame,
Yep.
and those are the two biggest games on their schedule that they have to get up for. And they could very well beat Notre Dame, and they could very well beat NC State. But I also think I don't think they're going to beat both. I just don't see that happening. The offense has too much ground to make up for them to be guaranteed locks in both games. And then they always have the chance of an ACC slip up. And DJ is not. I just don't. I'm not convinced that he's the quarterback that's going to get them to 11-1 in a playoff berth. Last year he finished with a 56% completion percentage, more interceptions than touchdowns. And during their 6-game winning streak at the end of the year, his QBR, these are all by ESPN, his QBR was still 91st across FBS quarterbacks. So even though the team bounced back, I think the bounce back was because of their defense. Look, their defensive line is going to be disgusting. Their defense is going to be really good. Their O line has another year of experience, but they caught a lot of the blame for their struggles last year, and I don't see how they got measurably better. So I think when you look at their schedule, Clemson's got NC State fifth week out of the block, and they have a look ahead spot there at Wake Forest. Their fourth
Yeah,
game.
they play Wake on the 24th of September. It's pretty early in the season for a pretty competitive team.
So my logic, besides all that, pointing to the under, if DJ doesn't pan out the way that I think he's not going to pan out, the question becomes how quickly do they go to Klubnik? And I think they're going to give DJ enough leash where that's too late. It's for a team total of 10.5 or for 10.5 because they can still win the ACC at 10-2. That's a legitimate possibility. So I don't think they make the call to go to Klubnik without seeing DJ lose at least one game, and then they probably pull him midway through another loss. And is it early enough that Klubnik can get him out of it? I don't know. But in my head, I think they lose at least 2 games. Team total 10.5 is just too high for me with a bunch of prickly teams in the ACC. I don't see them going 11-1.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I just think Clemson had such a letdown year last year, and the offense is clearly their biggest liability. I think 10.5 is just a little high. I think Notre Dame's going to be a very good team this year, and we'll do kind of independence much later on, probably in another episode. But I just think Clemson has too many question marks, especially on the offense, even if the defense is going to be great, to just outright assume that they are going to be the Clemson of old, where they just kind of steamroll people and head to the college football playoffs outright. In fact, I don't think they make the college football playoffs this year. But I think you covered it. Like the quarterback position is fishy with them, and the offense, I don't see how they measurably got drastically better. And last year was a not good year for Clemson football and Dabo Swinney. So I kind of agree there. I don't think that Clemson's going to perform in a top 5 slot this year. I don't think they'll be ranked 5 at the conclusion of the regular season. I don't think they'll make the college football playoffs because of who they are. They might get a New Year's Eve bowl, but I do have them winning the ACC as one of my 2 bets. I have another team, which we'll talk about in a second, but I don't think they're the powerhouse that they once were, at least this year.
Yeah, I think 10-2 is still respectable. I think they still are the favorites to win the ACC, which means they'll be playing on New Year's Day. But I just to hit the over and have 11 wins feels like it's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Duke football, not good.
Duke stinks. Next question.
Florida State. So Florida State, I don't know if they're an amazing team. I don't think they're at the bottom half of the ACC either. Mike Norvell's a good coach. Jordan Travis, if he can step up and be a playmaker, I think Florida State can kind of like take that next step up. I don't necessarily think it's a rebuilding year, but their strength of schedule is pretty tough. They got LSU and Clemson before mid-October. It's possible they find their groove, kind of get to 6 wins, but I don't see them being true ACC contenders, and I don't see them being more or less over 500. They're over under, I think, is 6.5. From what I last saw, I would probably lean the under there. I think it's certainly possible for them to get 6 wins, get in a bowl game, but I'm not sure I see 7 like no shit wins on their schedule unless they can really shock some people and beat much better teams as they kind of go on in the season.
Yeah, so Vegas has them at 6.5. I think it is important to note that they have LSU week 1, but they do have a week 0 game, and it's at home against Duquesne. So they're gonna have a warm up, whereas LSU won't. And that game's a neutral site game. I think they're like plus 2.5, if I'm not mistaken, right now. They have a really good chance of beating LSU, which would
Oh,
kind of
I
change.
disagree. I
Uh,
disagree there.
I think well, Vegas agrees with me because they're only 2.5 point
Again,
down.
I am the stupid in this because someone knows
Yeah,
something that I don't.
yeah. Either way, my point is, if they beat LSU, I think it does change the trajectory of this total, and it changes the trajectory of their season.
Oh, most
Um,
certainly. You could
yeah,
hang that up on your little cap for the rest of the season.
yeah.
We beat
I think
LSU.
I think outright they lose against Clemson, even though that game's at home. So you look at the rest of their coin flip games. It's at home against Wake Forest, at NC State, which will be a tough one. They go to Miami, which will be a tough game, and then they get Florida at home. Those are probably the last four of their games, and you count LSU as a fifth, and then you're counting on Florida State as they have in recent years to have a slip up somewhere in the middle of there, which is how you get to 6.5. I think they're going to be pretty good. I would lean over here.
Okay.
I think Jordan Travis is a pretty good quarterback. I think they're starting to reload. They finally have shown enough patience in a head coach to where he's been able to bring in some of his own guys. They picked up some good transfers. They had 11 players named in the portal. Um, so I think they're going to be way better than they have been in the past couple of years. I think they'll be competitive in that division because they are. So if you look at the Atlantic, they've got NC State and Wake behind Clemson in that division, and then Louisville is a sneaky team that we'll talk about in a bit. But I think you would say right now Clemson and NC State are easily the two contenders. And I think Clemson and NC State are the two best teams in the conference. But I think Florida State has a chance to beat one of those two teams and finish at least third, which puts them at about 7-5. So I lean over. I'm a believer in Florida State this year. I think they finally start to get it going in the right direction. But we'll see. I like you said, or LSU may not pan out for them, and then the entire way that this season unfolds changes for them as far as the total goes. So I cautiously optimistic on Florida State is the way that I would put
Okay.
it.
I don't hate it. I just we'll talk about the SEC later, but I think LSU's a decent team that had a slip up under Ed O after a pretty great season a couple
Mm-hmm.
years back. Georgia Tech. Any notes there?
This is one of my other picks coming out of the ACC. They team total. I see it at 3.5. Is that right?
That's what I saw as of today. Yes, and
Hammer
today
this
being
under.
August 5th.
Hammer this under. They have the fifth hardest schedule in America this year.
That's my number one note is that they have a tough as shit schedule for a far below average team, and I don't think they get to 4 wins. So I think this
Yeah.
is where we agree is under 3.5. I don't see them getting 4 wins.
Where are they getting 4 wins? Who is giving them 4 wins? They open up at home against Clemson, but they're going to lose that game. They get a tomato
Right.
can in Western Carolina, and then they go Ole Miss at UCF at Pittsburgh, who are all better teams than them. They get Duke at home, which might be a win. Finally, they get a bye, and then the rest of their schedule they only play 2 home games, and they're against Virginia and Miami, and then they go to Florida State, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and Georgia. Where are the 4 wins?
I don't see 4 wins. I don't think you see 4 wins. PFF has them as, like you were saying, the fifth toughest schedule in college football, and they are a not great football team. I think they're like power ranked somewhere in the 80s out of 130 Power 5 teams. They're just no passing game to speak of. Huge liabilities in the secondary, defensive front. is not good. I just don't think they pull it together, especially after 3 sub 500 seasons. Like they're just not performers in
Yeah.
any capacity.
So your argument to even think about getting to the over is they are at home against Western Carolina, they're at home against Duke, and they're at home against Virginia. Those are the three games they have the best chance to win. The rest of their home games,
And that's not 4 wins, which
yeah,
they would need to add for the over to
yes,
hit.
exactly. The rest of their home games are Clemson, Ole Miss, and Miami. Those are the rest of every other game is on the road
Yeah,
against a team that's better than them. How are they getting the 4 wins? Hammer this under, hammer, hammer, hammer it.
I agree. It is one of my few over unders from the ACC that I have. But I just don't see where they're getting it. How about Louisville?
The thoughts. I think Louisville is a team to be scared of if you're playing Louisville.
Okay.
If you're a higher ranked team, they are going to be dynamic offensively. Malik Cunningham is a very underrated quarterback. They've reloaded, even though they've lost. Tyler Harrell is a big transfer loss for them. That dude is a freak. But they have some skill position players and a running game that's going to keep teams honest, and they're going to be able to hit explosive plays and then control the clock running the football. And I think if you're Scott Satterfield is starting to generate momentum after he got off to like the worst start possible as a coach there by basically saying the nicest part about Louisville is the airport. But
All time fuck up. Someone
yeah,
needs to get some of
exactly.
these coaches' PR
Yeah,
people.
I don't know how that happened, but but since moving past that, I think with NIL they're starting to generate some momentum recruiting because they have a huge donor base, and I think that's going to translate to the field just mentally this year for some of their players. But the bottom line is they have a very dynamic running offense and they can hit explosive plays. And if you're playing them at home and the teams they get at home, they get Clemson at home, they get Kentucky at home, they get Pittsburgh at home. Those are the teams that are coming to them. Or sorry, I'm looking at their away games. They get NC State at home, they get Wake at home, and they get Florida State at home. Those three teams, you look at and you say they're gonna have to be on upset alert going to Louisville. Bowl game ish. I think they're going to have some slip ups there. They may lose a game they probably shouldn't, but I think their home games against teams that are higher ranked than them, watch out because I think they have the potential to really upset some people.
Yeah, I think they play spoiler pretty well. I think they're maybe a slightly above average team. Their over under right now is 6.5. I don't know that I see them getting 7 wins, but I do think they're in a position where a lot of people are going to be in that like look ahead when they go to Louisville or even when they play Louisville, and then football's football any given Saturday. I think you can have some upsets. I think Louisville will kind of shock some people on who they beat, but I also think there's going to be a game or two in there that they lose that they shouldn't lose, which kind of keeps them around 6 wins. I think
Yeah,
they're not a true ACC contender, but I definitely see them in a bowl game come December timeframe.
yeah.
You know
No,
what I mean?
don't touch the total. Just watch their home games against teams that are perceived to be better than them. That's the way I look at Louisville this year. Their total could be anywhere, but they have the chance to be really exciting.
Miami is a bowl contender for sure. A lot of people are big on Miami this year, like really big on Miami this year for the ACC, and I don't know that I see it. Their over under total is 8.5. Quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, he kicks if he can kick it up a notch from last year, he performed pretty well. But if he can take that next step, I think Miami is in a position to do well. But people have Miami as like the second number 2 in the ACC, and I don't necessarily see that. I also see a lot of hype around Miami that I just don't kind of understand because I think they're like an above average ACC team, but certainly maybe an outside contender for the ACC. But that I think that's really going to be because their strength of schedule is pretty weak, not because they are like a particularly good team that's going to challenge Clemson outright.
I think their off the field momentum with NIL is a big part of that. I think that Tyler Van Dyke is a legit star and has a chance to be a top 15 pick in the draft next year. And they also play in the Coastal, where they don't have to go head to head with Clemson, Florida State, or NC State. Now they do get Florida State on their schedule, but they get Clemson on their schedule, but they're not competing with them in the standings. And I think all of that points to, I think they do win the Coastal, and I think they go to the ACC championship game, and then it's one game for the for the title there. So I think they could win the ACC. I think they're going to be the best team out of the Coastal. As far as a serious playoff contender or a team that's the caliber of Clemson in the ACC, I don't think they're it. I think NC State is probably the closest team to Clemson as far as just talent on the field. But I think Miami has a pretty good shot to make the ACC title game. And that, like I said, it's one game, and they could end up winning the conference. So
they are currently the favorites to win the Coastal at like plus 140. I actually have Pitt, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but I have Pitt making the ACC championship against Clemson. And we'll get into it later. But I think Pitt is just a very good team.
Okay, yeah, I think that's where the hype comes from, but we'll see what Gaddis can do with Tyler Van Dyke. I think that's probably the biggest question mark is bringing in Mario Cristobal, who's an offensive guy, and Josh Gaddis from Michigan, who was a very good play caller for them last year, which you saw in the Ohio State game, and some of the games along the way, even Michigan State in a loss, they were hitting a lot of big plays in that game. So what he can do with a quarterback like Tyler Van Dyke, because Michigan didn't let him play with J.J. McCarthy the entire year last year. That's where the ceiling comes from. Is that if those two get clicking, they could be a 9-10 win team and really, really be a force in the ACC.
North Carolina. Any notes, Michael?
It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Go Heels! But they're not the Louisville of the Coastal, because I think they're better than that. I think last year was a very tough year for North Carolina, obviously.
Yes.
And a lot of the people around the program have talked about that, about the weight of expectations that sort of crumbled immediately with Enter Sandman at Virginia Tech and just never got back on track. The defense was horrific last year, and they're going to be better. But where does that land them in the ACC pecking order? I think they're all over the map. I think they're a bowl team. I think how high their ceiling is really dependent on whether or not whoever ends up being the quarterback. I think it'll be Drake May. I think those around the program think that May just has more potential and is a year younger. But if it's May, how his ceiling, and we talked about this with Jurkovec and some of the other quarterbacks in the ACC. But if his ceiling is fairly high, they could be a 9-win team. They could be somewhere in there and in play for the Coastal. But I think their floor is probably a bowl game at 6-6. But if you're looking for a player to watch across the country, Josh Downs is electric. He's maybe the best slot. Well, I won't say maybe the best slot receiver in America, because that title belongs to Jackson Smith and Jigba. But he is going to be a at least top 3 round draft pick next year. He's a fun player to watch. And if you're tuning into Tar Heel games, just look out for Josh Downs coming out of the slot.
Yeah, I mean, I think North Carolina, they mix it up on offense enough where they have a lot of RPOs, a lot of play action. Their quarterback can run. I think their defense is still probably their biggest liability. They have an average strength of schedule. So I think, I don't think they are going to take that next step and be ACC finalists, ACC contenders. But I do think I see them at a bare minimum getting to a bowl game. And probably surprising a few people with some of the more explosive players that they have on their team.
Yeah, I think 8, somewhere between 7 and 8 wins. I think 8 wins so NC State's a tough game, Pitt's a tough game, Miami's a tough game, Notre Dame's a tough game. So you look at the rest of their schedule and you say 8-4 is probably hitting the mark for Mac Brown this year. 7-5 is probably a disappointment. 8-4 is probably hitting the mark. If you can, and I'd say 9-3 because maybe you pick off a Notre Dame or an NC State, and you can kind of hang your hat on that for the year.
Yeah. I'm moving ahead to NC State. I think they're a good football team. I think they got about 8 or 9 wins, certainly within the realm of possibility, given their defensive capabilities. Devin Leary performed well last year at quarterback. They got a pretty weak schedule compared to the rest of the ACC. I think their ability to contend with Clemson, Texas Tech, North Carolina may surprise people, and they play all three of those guys kind of later in the year. Um, I, I'm pretty high on NC State. I don't think they're going to be ACC winners, but I certainly think NC State's going to surprise a few people, or maybe not surprise. I think maybe keep the level of consistency that they have had the past year or two. But I certainly think they're going to have about 8 or 9 wins and be a pretty damn good football team going into bowl season.
I mean, Dave Doran's a great coach. You're right. They get a very easy schedule here. Their schedule comes down to week 5 and 6. They
Yeah,
get Clemson on the road in week 5, and 7 days later they get Florida State at home. If they ride out 1-1 in those two games, they are going to be very much in play for the ACC championship game and an ACC title. Really, besides that, you look at their last two games, and like we talked about earlier, at Louisville in a look-ahead spot with North Carolina, Thanksgiving weekend, the following weekend, and then obviously a rivalry game at North Carolina, who will be looking for revenge after last year because North Carolina had them beat last year. So.
sure.
As much as it pains me to say, I think they are a 9-10 win team. I think if you're looking at those 4 games as their likely loss, because I think they're probably better than Texas Tech. Um, those those 4 games are their biggest trouble spots on the schedule, and I think out of those, they have a good chance to win 3 of them, two to 3 of them, and that makes them a 9-10, maybe an 11 win team if things go right. They have a lot of experience. Devin Leary's a really good quarterback to take care of the football. So I think they're going to be very good. And this is, part of this is why I'm not just a outright believer in Clemson because there's a lot of sneaky teams in the ACC, and North Carolina State is not sneaking up on anybody. But they are a legit contender for the ACC.
I mean, it's funny that it kind of comes down to that week versus Clemson. Like if they can beat
Yeah.
Clemson in that early season game, all they have to do is match the win loss pace of Clemson, because then even in a tie, the tiebreaker is them beating
Yep.
Clemson outright, and they are the Atlantic Division winner heading into the ACC championship. So
Yep.
I don't hate them as a contender, like true contender. I just what I'm going to probably wind up doing is betting the spread on NC State in that Clemson game, but I think Clemson probably pulls it out, knowing the stakes basically. But I think NC State's a good football team, and
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be fun to watch this year. Honestly, I
Yeah.
think they'll be a pretty fun team.
Mm-hmm.
Pitt. Pitt is my longer shot, but not a long shot to win the ACC. They're a fucking good football team, and I don't know that the loss of Jordan Addison is really. It sure will hurt, but I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker. Their strength of schedule combined with the picking up quarterback Keaton Slovis and like a largely returning, very good receiving core means I don't think Pitt's going to really fall from their 2021 performance. I think bowl aspirations are low compared to what their ceiling could be, which is an ACC championship. I'm not as big on Miami. I know they're a good football team, but I'm not as big on Miami as some other people. I think Pitt pulls out the Coastal Division winner, and then heads to the ACC championship, and then just kind of like we said, like it's one football game. It could wind up being what it is. I like them over 8.5 wins. I like them to win the Coastal, and I have a smaller future bet on Pitt as well for ACC champ. I think they're the best team in the Coastal, my opinion, but I think they're going to beat Miami, and I think they're going to kind of work a few teams that otherwise didn't think they were going to get worked.
Yeah, I'm cautious about the amount of turnover, and if Keaton Slovis were a slam dunk to me, I think I'd be higher on Pitt. But though nothing that he did at USC really makes me think that he's necessarily just going to come and pick up where Kenny Pickett left off. I think their defense is legit. I think they are a good team. I think they finished second in the Coastal. Um, I just think it's tough to go back to back and losing that much, not just the players, but the leadership out of the locker room that they had with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison. I think it's just a bit much to overcome. I see it, and their potential is there. It's just I don't know with that much turnover if they're going to be able to keep it rolling in the right direction.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm big on him. I'm excited to see what they pull out this year. Syracuse, Michael. Does Syracuse have a
It,
football team?
Syracuse is a place in New York, Alex.
It is. It's a place in upstate New York, which sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, Virginia. Any thoughts on Virginia?
Oh no, the only thing I did want to talk about with
With Syracuse?
Syracuse, Sean Tucker. If you don't follow Sean Tucker on Twitter, start following Sean Tucker on Twitter. Sean Tucker is Syracuse's running back, and he gives his own post game recaps, a la Magic Johnson, and they are some of my favorite tweets during football season, like anywhere. And I think he refers to himself in the person too. They're just phenomenal. They're like, yes, you kind of roll your eyes when you say this guy's talking about himself in the third person, but
I
it's
mean,
just
as long as he's self-aware when he does it.
I don't think he is, which almost makes it better. It's amazing. Like I said, the only entertaining thing coming out of the snow hill of Syracuse is Sean Tucker. Follow him on Twitter. He's a legit back. I mean, he was great last year. I think he'll be really good this year. But that's about it. He's the only thing to watch out of there. So moving ahead to Virginia, Tony Elliott's a good coach. PFF has them projected at 7. I think they're hovering around a bowl game. I don't know what the total is there, but they're going to be back to being a explosive offense, mostly because Brennan Armstrong is a very good quarterback and played very, very well last year. It was not a fluke. It was not like Hail Mary, high variance sort of plays. He is a good quarterback, and Virginia is going to be a very fun offense to watch. They're in the Louisville mold, but slightly better. Now the question marks come on the defensive side of the ball, but I think overall they'll be a tough out for most teams in the ACC. I think they'll be better than their next door neighbors, Virginia Tech. I think I think that bowl is probably their floor, and they're a similar team to North Carolina in that regard. I think somewhere between 6 and 8 wins is pretty realistic, because they have a great set of wide receivers coming back for Brennan Armstrong to 32. So I'm high on Virginia. They get a schedule that's fairly easy to manage. They somehow duck Clemson, NC State, and they get Louisville at home. They get Louisville, Miami, North Carolina, and Pittsburgh at home. So they get a very manageable schedule this year for them. I like them to finish. What is their total?
So I pulled it up. Their over under total is 7.5, but the under is minus 185. The over is plus 140. So it's a tough line to bet, especially like with the VIG on 185 minus 185. But
I kind of love their over if I'm looking at it right now. Yeah,
really.
I'm not going to add it because it's late in the game, but Richmond, they start the season Richmond at Illinois, Old Dominion at Syracuse, at Duke, Louisville. So they could easily be 6-0. And then the rest of their schedule is at Georgia Tech, and then they're home for 4 straight Yeah, and then they're home for 4 straight against Miami, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Coastal.
And Brandon
And
Armstrong is a fantastic quarterback. I actually, you have almost talked me into the over 7.5 because if they can come out as a powerhouse at the beginning of the season, I think one of the biggest liabilities they had was losing a lot of key offensive linemen. But as long as they can make that up, they have a fantastic receiving core. And Brendan Armstrong is first of all fantastic quarterback name Armstrong,
yeah,
but second of
yeah.
all like a very good quarterback.
Yes. Yeah, PFF had him as the fourth highest graded quarterback among Power Five quarterbacks last year. Yeah, I may add Virginia to the card. That's a
I'm
really
making
interesting total.
I'm making a note. I'm probably adding that over 7.5.
Okay, I'm glad we talked that out.
Yeah, it was good. Virginia Tech, not as good as Virginia.
No,
My notes are they could be in bowl contention, and Brent Pry is a first year coach, so who fucking knows? That was my note.
they're 2 years away from being a year away. Brent Pry is a really good coach. He's going to be a great
Yes,
recruiter.
yes, 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 yes.
They are going to they are they. I think they hired the right guy. I think he'll get them going in the right direction. But they're a year away from being a year away. I think 5 to 7 wins is the variance. Don't touch the total. They might pick off somebody they probably shouldn't, but um, but yeah, they're going to need some help. So
Yeah, they
that's
need to
really all I have
establish
there.
a semblance of a run game and see who's able to catch the damn ball before they can really worry about even getting in a bowl game. To my mind, but maybe Pride kind of has them pulled together. I think they're one of the weaker teams in the ACC though right now.
Yeah, yeah. They watch. I watched a couple games of Virginia Tech last year. Their offense at times looked like just it looked like they didn't call plays, and
Yes.
I don't know if that's it's a pretty large indictment on Justin
It
Fuente,
was.
but
It looked like who's on first if you put it in football terms.
yeah, it just and it maybe it didn't help that just like this is this is why we're stupid versus spread. I think a couple of those games were in the rain, so they were all muddy too. So it just kind of looked like they were out there
Terrible look.
just winging it.
11 dudes on the field just running around.
Yeah, they'll be better this year, but yeah, not they're going to be hovering around the bowl game. We on the wake?
Yeah, we are. It's our last team in the ACC for this ACC kind of wrap up for the preseason. I think they're a good football team with a weak strength of schedule. I think they're kind of like an outsider on ACC championship possibility. Uh, their RPO success is here and there. They got talent at the wide receiver positions. They're going to be hard to cover with how many RPOs they run. Basically, was my kind of note. Sam Hartman is a good quarterback. He's a competitor. I think he gives Wake a chance to show out. I don't know that I see them in contention at the end of the ACC. Kind of how it goes, but if they can beat Clemson in Week 4, and that's an early Clemson game, then I think we start talking about much like NC State, where like if Clemson turns out to be a fluke or not as good as people think they're going to be, then it really does become between Wake and NC State. If either of those teams beat Clemson, I think they immediately jump to the favorites to make it to the ACC championship game. But that's kind of my note. I think that Week 4 game is going to be the biggest game of the season, and if Wake can pull it out, they can pull it out, and they'll be in ACC contention.
I think I think Wake's going to take a step back this year. I think
Interesting.
7-5, fourth in the ACC Atlantic is probably where I'd have them if you put a gun to my head. I don't think they're sneaking up on anybody this year. I get it. They have a lot of returning talent. They have a strong wide receiver core. They were electric last year. That Army game was unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a
But
fun one.
yeah, but overall, I think every team that's going to play them this year knows exactly what they're getting. I think last year was kind of an outlier. I expect them to regress a little bit to the mean, and that's why I'm low on I'm high on Clemson, Florida State, and NC State out of the Atlantic. So I think they're going to have a tough road to replicate what they did last year. I think they will be good. I think 7-5, 8-4 is very respectable for Wake Forest. I just don't see them putting together the kind of season they had last year again.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, so that's our ACC roundup. I'm going to go over my picks real quick because this is a sports gambling show. So first of all, Virginia Tech under 3.5. We both kind of agree on that. They are a really
Under
bad
3.5. Oh,
three
Virginia
and a
Tech.
half.
No,
Oh, sorry,
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. Oh man, I fucked that up.
Yeah,
Georgia Tech under 3.5. They're a bad team. They got a really tough schedule.
yeah,
Not going
that's a
to work
lot.
out well for Georgia Tech fans.
That's a lot.
I have Pitt Coastal winner plus 260. I have Pitt ACC winner plus 900. Uh, the first one bet zero point 0.4 units, win a unit. The second one bet half a unit, win 4.5 units. And then I do have Clemson. I'm going to be that guy. I have Clemson minus 120 as the ACC winner. I'm kind of hedging my bet. I think there's a lot of good teams in the ACC, but I think if Pitt doesn't do it, I think Clemson just kind of pulls it out. I think they have that capability to kind of get in there and beat teams that they need to beat when they need to beat them, even if it's not pretty. And I'm waiting for another. If this year they struggle, then I'm out on Dabo and his Clemson team. But for right now, it seems like they're going to bounce back to me.
Yeah, my picks are Clemson under 10.5, Georgia Tech under 3.5. As we said, they're awful. They're an abomination. Hammer the under. And then I'm gonna add Virginia
Yeah,
over.
yeah. We're both.
Um,
I'm adding them over 7.5 as well at plus 140.
yeah. So 7.5 is too low for Virginia. I really like what they have, and Tony Elliott is a good coach. Um, yeah, I think Clemson still wins the ACC. I think they win it at 10-2, so the under hits. They'll be playing a New Year's Six bowl. I don't think the ACC has a rep in the playoff. Um,
Strong concur.
Combined, I think they don't have the top end talent to make it there. And I think they have a lot of good enough teams that are going to cannibalize each other, where nobody's going to get to that 11-1 mark to actually have a shot at being a playoff contender. So
Yeah, 100%.
that's the ACC.